department in America had a more richly deserved reputation for incompetence, corruption, and brutality than the New Orleans Police Department. In the early 90s, crime soared in New Orleans on the streets and inside the police department. Tourism plunged, property values plummeted. Finally, 3 years ago, the town's leading citizens decided enough was enough. The mayor brought in a new police chief, Richard Pennington. There would be no honeymoon for Pennington. On the day he was inaugurated, an FBI agent told him there was a drug ring operating inside the police department. So you had just raised your hand and taken the oath of office, and the FBI agent
waited till I was sworn in to tell me that. If he told me that prior, I might have not taken the job.
Were you involved in a large-scale drug deal?
Subsequently, 9 police officers were arrested in a drug operation. 2 or 3 months later, had a female officer that was arrested for killing another police officer. Right after that, had another police officer suspected of being a serial murderer. We had a couple officers that were arrested for drug activity. And also, the day I was being sworn in, a young lady was killed on the order of a police officer. Kim Groves was killed the day I was sworn in.
Kim Groves was a young mother of 3 who'd filed a complaint against a cop for brutalizing a teenager. Attorney Mary Howell, a prominent critic of the New Orleans police, now represents the family of Kim Groves.
She was assassinated. She was murdered by Lynn Davis.
He was a cop.
He was a cop.
The FBI had Officer Davis under surveillance for drug activity and actually recorded him setting up the assassination of Kim Groves.
It was like the audio version of Rodney King for this city. The police officer circling her house in the police car, calling the hitman about come do her now, describing the clothing she's wearing.
Man, that hoe standing out there right now with black jeans, a black coat, and a bitch brown skin with light brown eyes. I got the phone on and the radio. After it's done, go straight uptown and call me.
He would, quote, handle the 30, meaning he was going to handle the investigation of her death so that no one would ever be held accountable for it. The hitman's like running late. He's having like child care problems. It's like something out of Pulp Fiction. And then finally he goes over there, kills her, her children hear the shots and rush out and find their mother dead in the street, and then you hear him celebrating her death.
From what I'm hearing from the people, it's definitely a done deal.
And it was like a chill that went through the heart of, I think, almost everyone in this city.
Including Chief Pennington, who suspected that his own Internal Affairs Bureau, the unit which handled civilian complaints against cops, had tipped off Officer Davis that Kim Groves had filed a complaint against him.
So I couldn't even trust people in internal affairs. I had to abolish the whole internal affairs unit. We're moving in the right direction.
Pennington brought in the FBI to help him hire a new unit to investigate police corruption. And then he fired or forced out nearly 200 officers, about 1 in 7 members of the department. And Officer Davis, the U.S. attorney, put him on death row. And why were New Orleans police so corrupt? For one thing, they were among the lowest paid cops in America. For extra income, officers worked as rent-a-cops for just about anybody. That was always a big thing in New Orleans.
Always a big thing.
You'd always go around to these restaurants, particularly in the quarter, and you would see a uniformed policeman with a sidearm standing outside.
An officer could put on this uniform and make more money working in an outside paid detail than they could working for the city.
Pennington prohibited police from working in bars and nightclubs. At the same time, he won a huge raise for the cops, whose starting salary was just $16,000 a year. That raise, Pennington hoped, would attract better cops and remove some temptation for corruption. But the mess inside the New Orleans Police Department was just one of his problems. On the streets of the city, violent crime was out of control. And in his first year, Chief Pennington could do little to bring it down.
It had me really wondering whether or not I should continue to really want to be the police chief here. And I knew also that I would have to go outside the police department to get some help.
So he went all the way to New York and hired a consultant, former NYPD Deputy Commissioner Jack Maple, the one with the two-tone shoes, the shades, the bow tie, and the Homburg. In New York, Maple, that's him 2 years ago without the beard, devised a computerized system which tracks crime as it happens. and shows cops where the hot spots are.
Let's get down to the meat.
Okay, sir. The point is this.
Know about this?
How could we not know about this? We got a couple of characters going around with some badges and a pit bull now doing stick-ups. Why wouldn't we have a pattern on that so everybody knows about it?
Maple's crime tracking computers revealed that the old way of assigning cops to shifts was all wrong.
They left it up to those cops. When do you want to work? Well, guess when they worked? 10 in the morning to 6 at night, and they wanted to be off weekends. Now I looked at the criminal element. Their deployment was a little bit better. Maybe their chart wasn't as good. They had to work nights, and they worked weekends. The cops were working when the crooks were sleeping. We did the obvious. We made them work the nights and weekends and 4 o'clock in the morning. We made them get the crime every day and put it on a map. And we asked them in excruciating detail what their operations were.
While Maple was deputy commissioner in New York, violent crime dropped nearly 50%. But could the strategy that worked there work in New Orleans, where the murder rate was 5 times higher?
When I first went down there, they literally told me I didn't understand the culture of New Orleans. And I had to say, well, let's look at it. The guy that's selling crack on the corner in a housing project, is he different? Now, in New Orleans, a little different. He doesn't have to run up 13 flights of stairs like they do in New York. All right? But are they any different? The guy that says, stick 'em up, give me your money, is that character any different in New Orleans than any other place? Well, then if they're no different, how could it be any different in the way that you go after them to catch them?
In other words, whether it's New York or New Orleans, get the cops out of the station house and into the streets where the criminals are.
920.
For instance, few cops used to be assigned to the housing projects, even though 1 of every 3 murders takes place there. So Chief Pennington set up new police substations in some of the projects.
Our murder rate went down 80% here first year, 80%.
I'm not trying to take away from what you did, but it would seem to me that anybody would look at the problem and say, we've got a problem in the public housing projects, let's put some cops in there. But that never happened.
No, that never happened. Where they have a shooting?
Moments after we'd arrived, a man was shot in a nearby courtyard.
Guy shot. EMS has not arrived yet. Apparently the officers were back here.
What about the detectives? They get here yet?
They're en route.
Yes, sir.
He live back here? Where you live, man?
Well,
Be all right, man. The medical people on their way.
You had officers here before the EMS got here.
Absolutely. When a call goes out, they hear in a matter of minutes.
Because you have police who are based here.
Right.
What kind of information will you get on this shooting?
Well, someone's going to tell us, because of having police assigned here, who the shooter was, where the shooter lives, and they're going to give us the entire circumstances as to what transpired here. There he is right there. And they'll probably have a warrant for him before the evening's over.
Sure enough, someone did tell the police who the suspect was, a man named Antonio Williams. The police arrested him a few days later. Pennington insists that would not have happened a few years ago.
Before, we were just responding to calls for service. We were good report takers. We were the best report takers in the country. We go to a scene, we take a report, we turn it in, and go to the next scene. We weren't following up and investigating crimes.
One of the really horrific things is the same year that we were #1 in the nation in homicides, less than 39% of those homicides were solved. And solved doesn't mean that you've caught the person and arrested them and convicted them. Solved just means that you've identified the person.
If they solved the case by somebody saying Jack Maple did it, they would drop a warrant on Jack Maple that would be put in a computer system, and that would be the end of it.
Somebody in the department would know who committed the crime, but there would be no one who would follow it up?
There was nobody saying, Bradley, you're the detective. What'd you do today? How did you try and track Maple down? Where did you go? There was no hunting down of fugitives.
They considered it solved, but I didn't consider it solved until they had the body here. And so that was the difference.
I think a lot of the things they're talking about make sense in terms of pattern analysis of crime and follow-up investigation. I mean, the only question I have about that is, haven't they always been doing that, and why haven't they been doing it? I mean, it's basic common sense.
But they haven't.
No, they haven't been doing it. You know, I mean, does that sound ridiculous? So the fact that they're now being forced to do those things, I mean, that's a huge change here.
And it's paying off. A year ago, violent crime was still going up in New Orleans. Now it's down 22% in the first 9 months of this year. That's 4 times faster than it's going down in the rest of the country.
We're getting the crime every day. We're mapping it every day. We're holding people accountable that where the dots on the map are, we want them investigating that crime in a synchronized fashion.
Last week we had one murder.
We can spot these characters committing crimes after they do 3 or 4.
A 13-year-old that was arrested for the murder.
Catch them after they do 5 or 6, instead of not spotting them until after they do 40 crimes.
These days, the New Orleans police are solving twice as many murders as they did just 2 years ago, and they're making 30% more arrests. One reason arrests are up is more aggressive street operations. Police are targeting minor offenses like drinking in public. And they've been using a so-called drug loitering law that enables cops to arrest people hanging out in areas known for drugs. Recently, District Commander Louis Dabdou briefed his officers before they swept the streets searching for drug dealers.
We all know, and I think we'll all agree, that the person that is robbing us, sticking pistols in grandmothers' faces, knocking people over, snatching their purses, is your street vagrants, your crackheads, your dope fiends, your winos, whatever you want to call them. Those are the persons who are committing the crimes. However, it's a whole lot easier to catch that same person who's that drug abuser standing on the corner with a crack pipe in his pocket, hanging out in the corner all loaded with himself. So we're going after it from a different angle. That's the angle we're going after today.
While we were on hand, Dabdou's forces detained teenagers in what cops say is a drug zone. The young men were playing football and the cops found no evidence of drugs. This, says Attorney Mary Howe, is an example of the cops going too far.
It is not a crime to be a young black man playing football in New Orleans. It's not a crime. In fact, we give scholarships to a lot of young black men who play football. We promote that. We encourage that.
Some community leaders have complained that some police officers are getting too aggressive and that innocent citizens are being unjustly targeted in these sweep operations.
I've received some complaints. I'm not going to tolerate that. I'm not going to accept officers going out violating people's rights.
In fact, Pennington's chief of narcotics has now ordered his men to stop arresting people under the drug loitering law. At the same time, Pennington and Maple report that violent crime in New Orleans is now declining faster than it ever did in New York City.
This is going to be one of the safest cities in America.
Are you ready to declare a partial victory?
No. First step. We had a good first round.
Is it different today than it was 2 years ago?
Yes.
Better?
Yes.
You say that without hesitation.
Well, I can't think of a police officer who's been arrested for murdering a civilian in the last 2 years. That's the standards that we're looking at here.